One of the most common questions that we get amongst our community, especially beginning students, is how do I do the breath? And before I answer how do I do the breath, let's talk about why you do the breath and what are the reasons for doing it. So the purpose of the breath is to pull the mind out of the body, to take all of the energy that exists in our first three centers, the energy that we use to create a life, or that sexual energy, all the energy that we use to digest a meal, all the energy that we use to overcome some threat or challenge in our environment, all that energy that's resting in our first three centers, and draw that energy back up into the brain. Now, think about this. Most people's consciousness, most people's energy, most people's thoughts and feelings are continuously sending energy in the form of thought. Now remember, every thought has a frequency, every thought has an energy, every thought is carried on an energy, information is carried on a frequency, that every thought you think is producing an energetic field. So most people's thoughts are connected to their first three centers, and the first three centers are the centers of survival. So whether you're thinking thoughts about your sexual identity or sexual fantasies, whether you're thinking thoughts that have to do with pain and suffering, guilt and shame and unworthiness, whether you've been thinking thoughts of anger, aggression, judgment, fear, hatred, anger, frustration, those thoughts produce certain chemicals in the brain called neuropeptides. Those chemicals then begin to signal different hormonal centers, and those centers fill with energy. Just like when you have a sexual thought, all of a sudden, if you're having a sexual fantasy, certain neuropeptides are released to signal your first center, and all of a sudden you get energy moving into that center. And now, once energy is in that center, you're emitting information out from that center into the field. So, but if people are thinking certain thoughts, whether it's sexual thoughts or thoughts that are related to suffering or pain or guilt or shame, or thoughts that are related to frustration or anger or aggression, those thoughts then produce certain chemicals that begin to signal certain hormonal centers for you to feel a certain way. Once you feel that feeling, and now you're feeling angry or suffering or sexual or whatever, the very feeling that you're feeling is going to influence more of the same thoughts, which will produce the same chemicals. And all of a sudden, people get caught in these loops that become their state of being. In other words, they're taking thought in the form of an emotion and storing it as energy in these first three centers. So the majority of our energy is sitting in our first three centers, and very little in the centers that are above the first three centers. So then the repetition of this cycle over time is conditioning the body to become the mind of that emotion. So we have all this creative energy stored in our first three centers, and 95% of who we are becomes a set of subconscious emotional reactions, behaviors, habits, hardwired programs in which the body has been conditioned to become the mind.
How do we get back on the horse? How do you get back into that? Because I think I've gotten so close a couple of times, even today, where, you know, you're right there, and then the mind starts going. And then now I'm back in my chair, and I'm thinking about my taxes. Yeah. So how do you get back? How do you get back into it? Because then it feels like, okay, we're in the middle of the meditation, and we've got another, 45 minutes or an hour to go, and I don't know how to. Like, I was so close, and now I don't know how to start again. So that's.
You want me to throw you a lifesaver, huh? So how many people has that happened to? How many people have been just cruising along, and all of a sudden things kind of go the wrong way, and the next thing you know, you're hating the person sitting next to you, and you don't even know them. You're hating life, you want to quit, you hate me, all of that stuff. And look, how many times will you have to do that before you realize that you don't want to do it any longer? If you truly are astute and sincere as a student, the moment you start going there, the moment you start coming back and you fatigue or you can't reconnect again, I want you to know that you've come to the end of your emotional belief. You've come to the very end of your neurological network. And there's only one of two things to do. One is to return back and pick something mundane that's going to preoccupy your mind so you don't have to go any further into the unknown. Or the other is to just trust that you can go a little further. Now, if you trust that you can go a little further, then all of those thoughts are just thoughts in your head that you have to create coherence around. So if you stopped and you said, I am going to master this moment. Forget about going anywhere, doing anything, following instructions. I'm just going to work with my body to get it back into the present moment and continue to unfold back into possibility. Here's my question. If you turned that battleship around even slightly by executing a will that's greater than that program, and you are in hot pursuit of your own freedom, and your brain and your personality is beating you up. I've had those moments. And you know what? It's David and Goliath. It has always seemed bigger than me because I've given it so much of my attention and so much of my energy. It is bigger than me. But when I no longer pay attention to it, just like not giving my power to it, now I can settle myself back into the present moment, and it's just the thought. And I examine that thought, I look at it, and I become very familiar and conscious of it. And then my brain will say, well, what about this? You did this wrong. It's too late. Give up. And then I address that thought. Now, here's my question. 45 minutes of doing battle with your personality and continuously choosing love and unfolding deeper into it. If you make the effort to disinvest your attention and energy out of Goliath and pull energy back to you, is it possible that the next meditation that you have could be the easiest meditation for you to connect? Is it possible? So then that had to come up for you in order for you to evolve through it. Yes or no? And your body is just saying, look, I'd rather be worrying about my taxes than connect to the divine. Yes or no? There's a book that was one of my favorite books I ever read. It's called The Red Lion. And The Red Lion is a great story of an initiate that murders a alchemist and drinks the Philosopher's Stone, drinks the Red Lion, the elixir of life that causes immortality. And he wasn't ready to drink this Philosopher's Stone. He wasn't of the right consciousness. And when he drank it, he never forgot any of his lifetimes. And he saw all his demons. And this book is this journey of this soul through different levels of every single lifetime you can imagine that you and I can relate to. And he runs into secret society, and he becomes initiated. And there's a chapter in The Red Lion called The Kill Cure. And I ask my children to read that chapter every year. Every year they have to read that chapter because the initiate sits down in front of a statue, an inanimate statue. And his job is to animate that statue and bring it to life. Are you with me? And for years, he wakes up in the morning, makes his tea, has his breakfast, and then all day, he's putting his life force and his energy into animating this particular statue. And after years, he notices it swallows. And he notices it moving its finger. And the moment he starts to realize that he could take something inanimate and bring it to life, he gives it more of his attention and energy. Are you with me still? until it is a walking, talking being. Now here's the problem. This walking, talking being is his altered ego. And he doesn't know it. And it is abusive, it is disrespectful, it is controlling, it is arrogant, it is mean-spirited. And every time he reacts to it, it takes a little bit of his energy. And over time, he loses all of his life force because he's got so much attention on this thing. And this creature is saying, come on, hate me. And he's provoking him because he knows that the more he reacts, the more he's giving his energy to him. And now he's on his last breath. And he has the realization at the very last minute that it was him that brought it to life, and it was the extension of his altered ego. And he makes the decision from that moment on to no longer pay attention to it. And it now is trying everything to get a rise out of him. And he is aware of the initiation. And over time, he keeps his attention off it, and the thing starts to wither. And he takes all of his power back, and he uncreated the very thing that he created, and he no longer had an altered ego afterwards. You understand? Yes? You give it power, you give it attention, it gets bigger. If you just know that you got to move through those layers, and it is a journey, and you're doing it right now, and you get on the horse because you make the decision that this is the moment. And when your body gets frustrated and gets emotional and you go in the high beta, that is the defining moment for you to settle your brain and body back down into the present moment and unfold back into possibility. And I have done it tediously for hours. And just when I thought I couldn't go any further and I said, I'm done, you go a little further. And that's when you step into the unknown, and it just falls away. And you will say exactly what I say every time it happens. That was so worth it.